Welcome to Fearless Thinkers, the BTS podcast. As always, I'm your host, Rick Cheatham. Today, I'm joined by Ellie Ruderman, one of our directors here at BTS, because we're having a conversation with one of his great clients. So Ellie, tell us a little bit about our guest and Constellium.
Thanks, Rick. I'm happy to introduce you to Martin, who is the Director of Talent Development at Constellium. They're a global leader in the development, manufacturing, and recycling of aluminum products and solutions. And Martin has been working with us since 2019 to create and deploy a comprehensive leadership development program. The goal of the program is to align leadership, strategy, and culture, and to create a multiplier leader culture. Martin has years of experience in HR and talent management. He's worked for many global companies in both local and global talent development strategy roles. And in this conversation, he brings his unique perspective on how organizations can foster company culture and empower leaders to successfully navigate transformation and change.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Ellie. It was a truly great conversation, and it was fun to understand more about the work that they've done at Constellium and where they want to go.
Thanks, Rick. At this point, we've worked with over 500 leaders at Constellium, and a recent impact measurement survey has shown that these participants feel significantly more engaged, more empowered, and more recognized. And Constellium really saw this program as a key enabler for their company strategy.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Ellie.
Thanks, Rick. Happy to help.
Hey, Martin, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning, Rick.
What's been going on in your world?
Well, it has been a busy weekend. There was a German summer party in my kids' school with all the typical cliches like pretzel and beer and singing and songs. It was nice. And then also there was a water polo quarterfinal I played this weekend here in Paris. So it was busy but nice.
It sounds like time very, very well spent. All my kids are older now. In fact, one of them's getting married this weekend, and I kind of miss things like summer parties.
Well, congratulations for your kid. Yeah, it was nice seeing all the kids and all the parents.
Well, hey, I want to thank you again for agreeing to come on and share your story with our audience. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your organization.
Yes, of course. Constellium, it's a company working in the aluminium industry. We are transforming aluminium for customers like Airbus, Boeing, Porsche, BMW, Ford, GM, many big companies in the automotive, aerospace, and packaging industry. It's a 12,000 people company, $8 billion with plants and production facilities around the world.
It's funny because I spent the majority of the first part of my career in a company called Avery Dennison. And when you work for somebody that's a lot higher up the value chain, I think people don't realize how large these companies are in the role that they play in really making the world function.
That's for sure. And I actually know Avery Dennison. B2B is especially different, that's for sure.
Yeah, I used to refer to us as the largest company nobody had ever heard of. I'm honored that you have. So what was going on for you guys that made you realize that you needed to do something different from a leadership perspective?
I think it's important to understand some of the history of Constellium because it's actually quite a young and old company at the same time. So it was a merger of different companies, different times changing ownership, but it was only created in 2011 under its current form. One of our key challenges was to create a common company culture where people feel that they're part of one company. And we got the feedback that our leadership, learning and development offer was not homogeneous and depending on the location, depending on the region, quite different. And so we defined back in 2018 a new learning and development strategy until 2025, where we tried to implement the Constellium way of leading into our own company culture. There were also external factors that played a role, like the war of talent and talent attraction and retention was very critical. And so we are thinking and rethinking what can we do differently to help drive, retain, and attract talent into our business and shaping our company culture.
There are two interesting things that I'm just curious about how they really affected you all. And one actually relates to that thing that we've already been talking about, where when you speak of the war on talent, how have you all been able to maintain that employer of choice position?
We are a company, as you said earlier, which is not known to anybody in the public. So it's even more complicated for us to attract new talent. And so on the one side, we've developed and increased collaboration with local schools and universities. And then also, once people join Constellium, they actually realize that we have a story to tell, that there are lots of career opportunities. That's the companies that people enjoy working for. So our turnover rate is rather low. And once they understand that, okay, it's an interesting product, there's lots of technology aspects if you're an engineer, and there's lots of metallurgy aspects that you have to master. At the same time, you're playing for big companies, you have interesting customers. So it's a nice company to work for once you discover it from inside.
with regional differences, historical differences. How were you able to thread that needle of honoring the past while building a future that was common for all?
That was actually one of the challenges. If you have people who've been with the company for 20, 30 years, they know the previous companies and company cultures. And what we tried to implement at this stage was a company vision driven by our CEO and our executive committee, focusing on empowerment. How can we empower our teams? How can we empower different people in the organization? And how can we create a common culture without neglecting the history? If you are working in France for one company and then you've worked in the US for another company, the history and the background are quite different. But we found that learning and development, that's a key element where people are really engaged and motivated to join training programs, for example, to exchange and create kind of an internal network. So we've used our different L&D elements with a big focus on networking, best practice sharing, where people can see that even if I'm working in West Virginia or if I'm working in the middle of Germany, our challenges might be quite similar. We have similar customers, we have similar ways of operating our machines. So there was a big effort that we've done to put into our L&D strategy to also create a common company culture.
When you started to build that common leadership culture and language, tell me a little bit about what drove your thinking and decisions there and what you ultimately decided to do.
Constellium was a very lean company and quite a small headquarter team. So we said we had to start somewhere. And that's when we designed our pyramid of leadership for different levels of the organization. We have one global offer that we can propose to our employees. And we decided to start from the middle or mid-level leaders. So those typically are people who are managing other people and are not yet at director level. So it's really the big layer in the middle of an organization. And we said we need to create a program for those people. They have a big influence. They have an average at 6 to 7 direct reports who then are managing different operators. They are the layer between top management and the folks implementing. So we said, what can we do to help them? And that's when we started creating a project team. And one of the key learnings was to have a cross-regional, cross-functional, and cross-BU project team. And we had quite a classical approach. We reached out to different vendors, explaining them what we are trying to achieve, and then selected one vendor with whom we wanted to do this work.
I think that's actually brilliant to start with those middle managers. I actually had a client in the past that would refer to them as the mud layer because you have the executives at the top that are kind of owning the change. You have those frontline managers many times who want to believe what their senior leadership is saying and are ready to run. But then that layer in between sometimes can be very difficult because they became successful under the old way of working. And so I would think by starting with them, you probably got more traction.
Indeed, in our organization, sometimes they manage up to 200, 300 people in their department. It can be even 400, 500 in the larger plants. And so they have a big responsibility, but sometimes they were not well enough equipped, whether it's on financial topics, on HR topics, on leadership topics. So what we did is, before creating any program, we did a big customization effort and trying to understand the current and future needs. So together with BTS, we have done over 50 interviews from our CEO to shift supervisors in all the regions, trying to understand what's working today and what do we need to improve in the future. And only once we've done those interviews and understood the actual business need, that's when we started designing and developing an actual learning journey.
What did the ultimate solution end up looking like for you?
What we are offering today is a learning journey that takes 9 months. And during those 9 months, people go through different activities. There's a kickoff meeting at the beginning of the journey. There are different virtual touch points where participants meet and discuss amongst themselves without external support. There are 2 in-person sessions, and there's also coaching involved and digital learning. So it's a very comprehensive learning journey that allows people to learn on different levels in different ways on their own speed on different topics. And we decided to focus on 2 main topics: on the multiplier leadership aspect and on what we call business acumen or business understanding.
What were some of the surprises that you all experienced as you rolled this out?
The good surprises were that there was a big appetite and a big need, and people were motivated to work on the project. They wanted to get updates on how is the actual journey looking like and what we're trying to implement. So there was a big pull from the business and also a big push from the executive committee for this program. The challenge was, and I think we mentioned it a little bit earlier in the podcast, if you work in different regions, whether it's in Europe, North America, or whatever, with plants coming from a very different background, we had kind of a heterogeneous level of leadership. So we had some supervisors which are very strong on technical points, others are very strong on HR points, others are very strong on engineering points or whatever. And so to find a program that can satisfy many of the needs that people have, that was the biggest challenge. Then we had some external surprises. We wanted to implement the program just prior to COVID, but then obviously there was a big external event that put the program at risk.
I would think that not only for the work that you were trying to do, but for your entire business.
Yes, indeed.
I'm wondering how you all have either expanded or contracted this program as you've learned more.
We see it more as a journey than a one-shot event, whether it's the leadership development program itself, or whether it's creating our company culture, making people understand, for example, the value of the multiplier concept. It's a journey where we need different activities and different things we can do. I told you earlier that we've started with the mid-level leaders, but we've also created an executive development program for our top management. We also use similar concepts and the multiplier concept and the business simulation. We created specific line manager sessions for line managers of participants. So we get a shorter version of the program, trying to understand and help them as a line manager, supporting their participants in the journey. We organized last year a webinar together with Airbus, where we internally had some speakers and over 300 people joined the webinar and talking about the multiplier effect and what people can do, whether it's at Constellium or at other companies. And we really tried to implement also in the future different ways of story sharing and recognition programs. So really trying to create this shared company culture and the shared language that in all levels of the organization you can understand and lead in the Constellium way.
Meeting your leaders where they are with what is most important to them. I've been in too many of those situations, especially with sales leaders, where, they don't get to see things through the lens of how they have to manage their business all day. And they end up kind of checking out, I think, too many times.
That's why we felt it was important to make sure that this notion of leading and empowering people and using the multiplier concept is understood at different levels of the organization. So not only for the target group, but also for the line management, for the top management, and making sure it's a common concept at Constellium.
So I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the outcomes you guys have had so far.
So we run sessions in French, German, English, Czech, etc. And as of today, we have almost 500 people worldwide who went through this program. We've launched 20 cohorts over a period of 3 years, and the feedback we got was outstanding. So participants, they really enjoyed the training. We had at the beginning, some people were quite skeptical, especially some of the more seasoned managers said, well, I've seen so many leadership trainings, why should I go through another? And then at the end of the day, for many of them, they said it was one of the best programs they've ever seen, that they were surprised by the level of professionalism, by the level of interactivity, and by the learnings that they could take from this program due to peer coaching, due to the different activities. So that was very positive and encouraging feedback. We also launch every 2 years at Constellium a global engagement survey, and we just got the feedback from our 2024 edition. And when we compare people who went through the program to people who didn't go through the program, people who went through the program almost had 15% higher scores than the average. So for some of the questions, whether you're proud to work to Constellium or whether they believe and understand the business objectives, now that we have put them to the program, the answers are much higher, and with some reflection on the program, did not only enjoy it, but also help them to become better leaders and make better business decisions.
When people feel like they're being invested in, a lot of times better leadership shows up both in their work and in survey results like this.
It's good to see that those programs actually matter and have an impact.
What is your advice for someone who is just beginning this journey and they're starting to hear of the same kinds of needs that you described?
The first thing is to understand the business need. So what are you trying to achieve or what you're trying to solve with the initiative? Then you need sponsor support from your top management. Third point, I would say a cross-functional project team. So in the project team I created initially, I had people from all 3 different business units and people from manufacturing background, people from commercial background, people more from an HR background. So really a cross-functional project team. And then what worked well for us was to have a customized solution. So for example, we created a customized business simulation where people had to run 3 years virtually, put into 3 days, but had to run a business which is similar to Constellium and really understand, okay, if I take such a decision, what's the impact on our cash flow? What's the impact on our profitability? And so for this, you need the right partner, especially for a small team internally, to make sure that we work with the right company together.
I can't thank you enough for agreeing to come on and share your story with us. And I'll look forward to hearing even more as the program continues to roll out and you get even better results.
It was a pleasure to be here, Rick.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to bring to you our fearless thinkers. If you'd like to stay up to date, please subscribe. Bios for our guests and links to relevant content are always listed in the show notes. If you'd like to get in touch, please visit us at bts.com. And thanks so much for listening.